We are excited to have the two people that you saw on the screen in the clip before with us today, Cara Castanova and Trennis Evans. Thank you for joining me, guys.
Hey. Thanks for having us, Mel.
Wow, I mean, I was so proud of you both watching you there, knowing that you guys have shown up from day one to fight for the truth, to fight for these people that are being persecuted. So I don't know who to go to first. So let's go to Trennis first. Tell everyone about yourself, because Cara's been here many times. You were here once a long time ago. Let's remind people of who you are and how you ended up sitting there speaking truth to the whole world about January 6th.
Yeah, well, I usually appreciate the ladies first, but age before beauty, I see in this case. I see that's what we're respecting. Anyway, so look, Mel, we've talked about this before. I didn't commit any acts of violence. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't harm anyone. I was helping police officers on January 6th. It's indisputable. It's on video. And I still got to go to federal prison for January 6th. I believe that it was an atrocity and miscarriage of justice to receive the sentence. I believe that so much is wrong for so many people with these charges, the overreach. We've seen that 19 different federal judges in the DC courts have been wrong about 1512. And we've seen other cases now where the other pieces of this are falling apart. Earlier decision, the sentencing enhancements that were cast onto these people, terrorism enhancements and so forth. In addition to that, you have 1752 and 5104, which are the knowingly entering, remaining, and restricted building or grounds. And the other charges that are now coming back down to the appellate that's already been sent back down. It is a sign of the facts that the DOJ had a massive overreach on this, and that everyone came to recognize that the narrative has started to crumble. And if not for the work of people like Cara, I met Cara because Cara and her organization were out fighting 3 years ago, and I sent a donation to Cara and her organization because I believed in what she stood for. And I thought, these are the kind of people. I called and I talked to somebody from her organization, and I came to believe that Cara was a good person, and that's where I want to do that. And I donated to her organization, and since then we have worked hand in glove time and again, and I've been honored to have a chance to work with Cara. She's been a fantastic force in this from the very beginning. And people like me who were defendants that had nowhere to turn in the very beginning had people like Cara already on the scene. So thank you for that, Cara.
Thanks so much, Mel. And Trennis, thank you so much for saying that. I feel the same way about you. You're definitely a good ally to have and very trustworthy. And Mel, of course, you know how I feel about you and your show and just how much you've done for the community. Back 3 years ago, going on 4 years ago now, we were out there fighting, screaming from the rooftops that there were political prisoners in Washington, D.C., and nobody wanted to cover it. The mainstream media wouldn't cover it. A lot of media wouldn't cover it. It was only really places like Mel K and InfoWars at the time that would even touch the subject matter. And it was really frustrating for me as a journalist and as a reporter, because I know this stuff was factual, but nobody would talk about it. They were too afraid. Fast forward over 3.5 years now, when I broke the Roseanne Boylan story, which was another woman who was killed on January 6th. Everybody knows about Ashley Babbitt now, thank God, because there was a time when people were even afraid to mention Ashley Babbitt's name. And Trump mentioned her name at the debate 2 days ago, which I was very grateful for. Roseanne Boylan is another woman who was killed that day, allegedly by the actions of police. There were so many things that people don't know, that she was hit by a pepper ball, that she suffocated from the tear gas, that she was beaten brutally by policewoman Lila Morris until she started bleeding from the eye and the nose and turning blue, and she was unconscious on Capitol steps. This is a story that everybody in America should know. This is something that should be in the history books, yet it's been censored and it's been buried by the government and the mainstream media, who basically lied and said that Roseanne Boylan died of a drug overdose. They ruined her reputation, her legacy, and her honor, because she was a drug counselor. She had been clean for 7 years. She was a wonderful person, and they painted her as some sort of kooky QAnon conspiracy theorist. Right. And, they really did a disservice to her. If you look her up on Wikipedia or any of the mainstream media articles like CNN, probably the New York Times, they haven't corrected what they've said about her, which was she died of a drug overdose, and that since has been debunked. The autopsy was hidden from her family. They wouldn't give it to her. They had to sue to get it. And they had a second autopsy conducted. And that autopsy said she absolutely did not die of a drug overdose. Right. So that was what I was testifying to Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress about, how suppressed that story was, how I was kicked off of Facebook for life. how my website got literally ripped off the World Wide Web, how I was censored on the former Twitter and just completely canceled after I started reporting on January 6th, and specifically this story, because I did the math and I put the dates together, and it wasn't until after I really started advocating for Roseanne Boylan and justice for her that I really just got deleted from the World Wide Web. So I was there testifying about that and just trying to bring, the information about Roseanne Boylan to people's attention, because still to this day, many people say only one person died on January 6th, and that's Ashley Babbitt. And even people on the right side say that, people in conservatives say that, just because this information has been so suppressed. So I think it's important to still keep talking about it. And I think it's really just a testament to how January 6th has been so distorted by the mainstream media, and how, the Kamala Harris Biden regime still continues to use it as, a way to get elected. Harris was going on and on about it in the debate. And I really hope this information reaches President Trump, because it shows what a cover-up January 6th was.
Well, we've always felt like the motive was political in nature, and I think a lot of it relates back to something I touched on at the committee hearing. Was the issue there that we had a discussion about was that George Washington University, Columbia University were granted $77 million under the Obama Congress. And they used that to study domestic violent extremism, supposedly. And they made these come back. They used this to bring to life the idea that people that are hold patriotism, the people that stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, that stand for the national anthem, that believe in what those things do, that they actually feel something from that, are these nationalists, right? We've demonized the word as nationalist and said that these are bad people now. So that's why we were talking pre-show. We talked about the fact that they took pictures of the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence you see behind me as actual evidence when they came to my home. They did this. This was a consistent method. They took people's Constitution. They had, boxes of, hand-sized or pocket-sized constitutions. Theirs is about a narrative. It's about control. It's about ceding the power that these Democrats, which are Marxist, and this radical left ideology of the one world government needs to actually root out the idea of patriotism. It's a programming issue. And the American people that are going through January 6th are just fodder for this. And, many of us, I think, have held the same opinion. I went to demonstrate, and many people went to demonstrate. I'm not sure of anyone that went there for insurrection. I'm yet to hear that. That's a ridiculous narrative. And I always remind people, you mean to tell me the most armed populace on the face of the planet, men like me, came to the United States Capitol to overthrow the largest military industrial complex to ever exist, yet I left my firearms in the hotel in our home or whatever, didn't bring them to the Capitol, and I brought a megaphone and a plastic flagpole. Absolute prepared for an insurrection against the largest military industrial complex to ever exist on the face of the planet.
Yes, and I said that from the very beginning, and I tried to warn the left, because I said the power pendulum always swings, and this will affect you. The case law that they've now established against protesters, the laws that they're trying to write against protesters will affect people on the left because they protest a lot. It's that simple. I was there on January 6th documenting the events, and obviously, we all know now that there were a lot of federal agents mixed in the crowd that were obviously, riling up the crowd. But yes, I 100% have experienced firsthand, because I've tried to organize rallies after that. For example, the Justice for J6, which was about, I'd say, 8 months after January 6th, to alert people that there were political prisoners in DC jail, had such a small turnout. And it wasn't for lack of interest. It was because, number one, Nancy Pelosi was using her megahorn telling people to stay away, that it was going to be another insurrection, from what I remember. And there was just all these rumors going around that the feds were going to be there to set everybody up. So they basically accomplished their goal. 200 people showed up when so many people were interested in coming. So it's been difficult. And now, as we know, there's so many people that are in jail from January 6th for just simply protesting and being in a space that they now decided to dub as a, restricted area, very arbitrarily. They could do that anywhere. They could call anything a restricted area. So people are afraid to go out and protest now, especially Trump supporters, more than anybody, because they're the ones who have been prosecuted, persecuted. But like I said, the power pendulum could swing in the future, and people on the left should be paying very close attention to this, because it's very scary. It's very draconian. And, people just need to wake up and pay attention, because protesting and assembling, with people that want to protest, is one of the most important things to in America right now. And since the beginning of time, since 1776, it's been the most important right.
That's something we spoke about on the Hill. So the totality of the impropriety that exists today, that these people no longer hide it, these Marxist, globalists, whatever you want to label them, because it probably all fits and they're there for different causes. But at any reason, you have to look at the idea here is that they are no longer hiding in the shadows or whispering in the corners. These people are having ticker tape parades down Main Street with the fact that the Constitution's out the window. The idea that you can preclude First Amendment arguments, that means that you're not allowed to raise an argument about First Amendment protected free speech and assembly. None of these things can be raised in a trial. You're not allowed to argue them. That is the most insane thing I've ever heard. You have, in addition to that, the act of the FBI, but don't forget that these people are sent out with the idea, the very idea that these people are all insurrectionists, that they were part of violent armed extremism, and that they came there to overthrow the federal government and killed police officers. This is what you gin up in the people, in the heads of those who are going to go effect an arrest on an individual that are headed out into the public to do this in a SWAT team, and they think that they're about to experience another Waco on their hands. But in truth, and I think in reality, that is what they're looking for. That is the sought after narrative, because it will support this whole domestic violent extremist ideology, because it hasn't shown up. They show up and arrest grandma. You think grandma's ready for a shootout? They show up and arrest people like me and put my son at gunpoint. Put the, Mel, you've had it on their show. You've shown the video on your show.
Yeah. This
has happened to people over and over and over again. And as far as what happens with the judges and how terrible it is, we came on and Kara and I both have been on your show to talk about people like Judge Kelly and Judge Mehta and what happened in the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers trials. The absolute abuse of our system, the destruction. Kara and I were talking every day during both of those trials, and Kara was reporting on it. We were working on it. Condemned USA was doing, legal work behind the scenes with the attorneys. We're firsthand witnesses to this. We have lived it with the individuals that went through this. As a matter of fact, I myself was facing 23 years in prison with that phony, nonsensical 1512 obstruction charge that they dreamt up. And all I can do is just grin and bear it, right? I mean, that's what happens. That's just the way it is. You have to just go, well, I guess, it was correct enough at the time is how you're supposed to feel about it. I'm allowed to have feelings about what's happening in the great injustice. And you said something earlier, Mel, that clicked with me. And I know that it didn't come out right. That we didn't unify against the government. We unified to notify the government. You corrected it later in your redress statement, but we unified because we wanted to put the government on notice that we, the people, demanded justice, that we, the people, wanted answers. That's what a protest is. And you have all of these people that carry water for the communist ideology, the Marxist squadron of death and the legion of terror that goes on in Washington, D.C., that's allowed to operate with the absolute impunity. And we don't have the people in Congress on the House Judiciary Committee, because when I talk to members of that committee, they tell me they don't have the votes to impeach someone like Beryl Howe, who overturned independently the bond for 15 different defendants and brought them into D.C. to be held pre-trial after another judge who does the same thing every day already said no. So one judge was right and 14, 15 were wrong. Come on now, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
This is the same consistent thing with the panel, same with the jurors. It's all part of this. And it's sick, it's disgusting, and it's got to be rectified.
I mean, so just being in this J6 community, I was asked by Jonathan Gross. He had recommended me. He's Rabbi Jonathan Gross, who's been such an ally and a wonderful man, taken really a lot of pro se cases and has been fighting to the death for these guys. Yeah. So I just wanted to give him a shout out and thank him for the work he's done for the January Sixers. Had referred me to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I guess she approved it. And I want to thank her for actually still caring about January 6th, 3.5 years later. She's one of the only. There were 3 other congressmen there at the hearing. Sorry, I was nose itched. There were 3 other congressmen there at the hearing that day, and I wanted to thank all of them as well. And this is hopefully just the start of more hearings like this, because there was so much information. We had met with some of them earlier, right before the hearing, and I was talking about the Proud Boys trial and the injustice that I was one of the only journalists, literally one of the only journalists sitting in that courtroom. It was so sad that I witnessed firsthand, and they said this really warrants its own hearing. So hopefully stuff like that will come up in the near future. I'm hoping before the election so that the American public just understands just how much they were lied to about the Proud Boys, who could be literally the guy that lives next to you and is a plumber. These are innocent men. These are normal guys that were caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time, literally set up by the government and entrapped by the government. So that, again, should have its own hearing, and so much other information that we have as a collective, me, Trinus, and other independent journalists who have been covering this for 3.5 years now, really need to be given more of a platform. And there's so many others like me, like Dave Summerall, I think that they should put up there, and Gary McBride and Julie Kelly and others that have been working every single day to get this information out there, and need to have more and more hearings about this stuff, because there's so many facets and elements that we didn't even hit on. There just wasn't enough time, and we didn't want to go too much into the weeds with what we knew, but we know so much. And it's said that there are a lot of Republicans in Congress, unfortunately, that are terrified to even touch January 6th. They're supposed to, stand up for their constituents and for the people, and everybody has gotten railroaded, and they're still getting arrested every day. So hopefully this will give the rest of Congress bravery to be able to touch this subject matter. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted to say that it's so important to recognize, you mentioned the other congressmen, Congressman Brasheen, Congressman Burleson, Congressman Roy, and Congressman Green did, as Kara said, have the kind of courage it took to have the first truly meaningful breakdown in getting into this in so long. I mean, this has been so long coming that we need this, and we need to have more, because it exposes the truth. And I think it's important right now, and there's a small caveat to the idea here, that some of this, as the American people hear it, that they've been forced to hear the lies of the mainstream media about this for 3.5 years, and they don't know the facts, that hearing it here in this reputable forum, this unquestionable forum, that here we go, these people are coming in, they're willing to go under oath, they're willing to say these things, make these statements, these accusations, allegations, if you want to call them, but they're facts, and tell what really happened. It's very important to President Trump. It's very important to the sanctity of our election, because these Democrats, like the Harris campaign and the Biden campaign previously, actually ran, most of their campaign has been something to do with January 6th, the supposed insurrection. And Donald Trump did this. Donald Trump said, walk peacefully and patriotically down to the United States Capitol. And that's what we did. And that's where things changed, is when people arrived. And that's when the United States Capitol Police and MPD, being the 9th most violent police force, the MPD, chose to illegally abuse their authority by firing of weapons, that creating lethal devices out of what were supposed to be non-lethals, by utilizing them from heights where only headshots were available, by using CS gas, the type that had a lot to do with the death of Roseanne Boylan, and all of these other actions that came into play that created this actual horrific scene, that what it became, where people died at the United States Capitol. They want to reference this 9/11. They want to reference it like Pearl Harbor, Normandy, D-Day, some of these events. And it's more like Kent State. It's a hell of a lot more like Tiananmen Square. And it's a hell of a lot more like an absolute bold-faced lie that they all know that they have done, that they produced and carried this water to deliver an injustice to the American people so they can control the outcome of an election and affect what we, the people, actually deserve: a true and honest president that we voted for in this United States in 2020. We're going to vote for again in 2024. Well, not only the cruelty of the way that the entire process plays out, but what they do to you in the incarceration. Remember, I was held. They bragged about putting me where the 9/11 terrorists were held. They literally bragged about that at the jail. Now, most of the officers, most of the corrections staff were good people, and I think operated with decency. However, there were some that thought it was a game, that thought it was fun to do this. And I think I never went outside. I would never walked outside. When they closed the door, all the time that I spent in there, my entire sentence, I never left that solitary confinement room, not for rec, not for exercise, nothing. One time, I apologize, I left one time for an evaluation, and that was it. Now, but I want to remind people of this, and I say this, and I say this to you, DOJ, and I say this to you, the journalists that carry water. If you think you're going to overthrow this country, and I say this to the judges, listen closely. Nuremberg 2.0, Nuremberg 1.0, they hung the people that did this crap. Listen closely to my words. And I don't mean that this is going to be something that we, the people, are going to take into our own hands. I mean that there will be retribution. There will be courts that will find and hold you accountable. And if they ask for volunteers to pull the lever, I'll be stepping up in the front of the line.
Well, I always say in the end, God wins. And I really believe, like, I just watching Kamala Harris on the stage saying, Trump is going to politically persecute his allies. I mean, his enemies. Is ridiculous because that's exactly what they are doing. And I think they have so much to lose in this election because if there's ever any investigations into these J6 trials, the Department of Justice and, their collusion with the Biden-Harris administration or regime, as I like to call it, they probably will more than likely will be found guilty and go to jail if there is a fair prosecutor. But going back to what you said about people cheering it on, it's absolutely disgusting. Like, I had an FBI visit to my house and, I don't know if they were lying to me. You can't really trust what they say, but they basically told me that a Facebook friend had, ratted me out for being at the Capitol, God forbid, taking pictures.
You're a journalist.
Right.
I mean,
and there are so many people, there was a tip line and there were so many people that were literally turned in by their neighbors. Some people, from what I understand, from their mothers, from their own children, because the Biden regime is so sick and scary that they were encouraging people to turn in their own family and their own friends. So it was really a disgrace, I think, a disgraceful time in America. And I always tell people to really, and this isn't like, not to distract from the subject matter, but there was a case called Missouri v. Biden that went to the Supreme Court that showed that the Biden administration, at the same exact time that all of these January 6th prosecutions and persecutions were really happening, and they still are, but this is at the very thick of it, was censoring people. And they were literally like mafiosa, reaching out to the Facebook, as Mark Zuckerberg finally came out and said, and to Twitter at the time, and saying, you need to effing censor these people. Like, I've seen the emails, I've seen the discovery because I work for the Gateway Pundit. So, and everyone, I wanted to give a shout out to Gateway Pundit, by the way, for raising millions of dollars for the January 6th legal defenses. And Jim Hawk, who is the greatest person to work for. But going back to the lawsuit.
I second that.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to the lawsuit that I spoke of, Biden, Missouri, Gateway Pundit was a part of that because we were so censored. This was happening, and Trent and I have spoken about this, at the same exact time that all these people were getting arrested and going to jail. I truly believe that there's discovery out there, and I implore and I beg with an attorney general out there that is a good attorney general of one of the states to bring this case against these very, very corrupt judges and the DOJ. I truly believe the January 6th committee and that the Biden regime and the Harris regime was illegally colluding and corresponding and sending memos to the judges, to the Department of Justice, to Merrick Garland and the prosecutors, basically deciding what was going to happen with these prosecutions. There's a separation of government that's not allowed to happen. We all know that. I know in my heart, God tells me that these emails exist out there, that they won't be very hard to find, that there was a collusion at the highest level. And just seeing the emails, like I said, for the Missouri v. Biden, with the tremendous amount of government censorship when it came to the mandates and COVID and all of that stuff. At the same time, I believe those very same administrators were colluding with the judges, were colluding with the Department of Justice and with the January 6th committee at the same time. And that needs to be exposed in the future by an attorney general of one of the states.
Well, let me explain this. The first place I ever heard about this at the time was from James McGrew, a defendant who smuggled out the information that was on the tablet, got us these screenshots of this. I don't know, these guys are pretty creative. They managed to get us the screenshots of the lesson plans and then outline the entire thing, send it to us. And I just was blown away by what I was reading, this entire lesson plan of the reprogramming effort. It is malice. I mean, this is no question about it. And we couldn't believe it because like I said, you could take a class on something, you get a foreign language or learn a trade. And then suddenly here we are where we're talking 2021. And there was a lesson plan and offerings there where we talked about Trump's big lie about the election, how Trump undermined the Constitution, how Trump ruined the country, it was just unbelievable. And it's like, where has any of this been adjudicated that this becomes a actual lesson plan? Right. They don't care about right and wrong. They don't care about ethics, morals, standards. They care about one thing: power and control. Right. They'll say anything, they'll do anything to take power and control, just like they have in the men over in those jails of the veterans and the American citizens that are being abused. That is well documented, not only by the U.S. Marshals, but their own medical records identify these absolute matters of abuse. We have men who have precancerous condition or cancer that are locked up, not being in cancer treatment. We had men that had to go so far as to literally go on the run because they knew they would die in prison.
Right.
They would die in this gulag because a judge, we normally have things like compassionate release, you have medical issues that would cause you great harm to your, as an individual, to your health, and you're often allowed to work on house arrest or something of that nature so that you can continue the necessary life-saving medical care, but not when it comes to January 6th, because these cases are different. Remember, we preclude free speech. We don't allow you to compare to anything else in history. January 6th cases are only sentenced like January 6th cases, and the precedents were set by none other than Beryl Howe. You mentioned impeachment.
I know it. Yeah.
And Beryl Howe should be the first one impeached and the first one to hang for this. Honestly, that's where it is.
And she's also the one.
I call them the dishonorable.
Don't forget.
They don't even deserve to be called honorable. I just call them, every time article I write,
unbelievable.
Dishonorable Judge Howell. She is really one piece of work. I mean, that woman is gross.
Judge Howell also was the one, she was rebuked by the appellate court because she gave information from the trial court to Congress. And she just like, she obviously, it's not that she doesn't understand what the separation of powers mean. She doesn't care. She will serve the narrative. And that alone, these ideas alone, that your failure at the bare minimum impeachment, at the maximum, Title 18, Section 242 states that anyone, even a federal judge, who knowingly deprives individuals of their constitutional rights can be held and imprisoned up into life in prison and or death. So I'm not calling for anything that our laws don't allow. I'm calling for the deserved punishment of many of these people. And maybe then, like they say for us, right? We have to do this to you to make sure like nothing like this ever happens again, Mr. Evans. I think maybe some of these people need to be put to death so that we can make sure nothing like this ever happens again.
We also, Kara, I just want to say this about that because Kara, you covered a lot of, there's psychological damage, PTSD, and horrible emotional problems that will come to a lot of these people that have gotten out or people don't fully understand if they have no concept.
A lot of suicides, a lot of people have committed suicide, many people, and it's very sad. And if you even look, when you were speaking earlier, what popped into my mind was one of the fake witnesses on the January on Select Committee who literally said, I regret what I did, I was wrong. Everybody that I spoke to after January 6th, especially at the beginning, the people who were arrested said that they were, when it was time to come for sentencing, if they had pled guilty, they received a letter from the January 6th committee basically saying, oh, we want you to testify. Hint, hint, we'll give you a better sentence if, you say what we want in front of the Select Committee. And that guy was actually the co-defendant of Matthew Perna. He was Matthew Perna's co-defendant who they were adding on the terrorism enhancement to his sentencing, and that's why he killed himself, sadly, because they were just breaking him mentally. Whereas the guy who was his co-defendant is sitting there on the Select Committee, basically saying he regrets everything, it was all Trump's fault, and whatever else it was that he was saying. So this is a lot of the reprogramming that you talked about, literally fear of sentencing, and a lot of the men and women thinking that if they said something in line with what the regime wanted them to say, that maybe the judge would have some sympathy on them and give them a lighter sentence. So it was really sick and diabolical, and it continues to this day. And going back to Beryl Howell, who I can't stand, and I really believe does belong in jail, in the very least, she belongs in jail, because she has broken the law so many times. And the Cressman 6 is something that not a lot of people have known about, and I've spoken to Trennis at length about this. How can we make people know that Beryl Howell, the chief judge at the time, was solely responsible for literally creating laws that, and you can't create laws as a judge, by the way, only the Congress can do that.
Right.
That said that there was different goalposts for pretrial detention for January 6ers that doesn't apply to the rest of the criminals or quote unquote criminals or defendants in the rest of the country. So there was the Bail Reform Act of 1984, which basically says you cannot be held pretrial unless you are a threat to the community or a flight risk. And that is really hard to meet those goalposts. So she literally created 6 more goalposts named after William Cressman, I guess, who was before her. And she had his case, which said that if you were wearing tactical gear that day, right? Trennis, correct me if I'm wrong. That was one of the goalposts. If you were wearing tactical gear on January 6th, you could be held pre-trial. And there were 6 other really arbitrary goalposts that, like I think it was, if you went inside the Capitol, you could be held pre-trial. Just anyway.
Method of entry, depth of which you went into the building, time that you were in the building, all of these matters were, as Kara was saying, this was a judicial overreach. This was inconsistent. It was a departure from our societal and judicial norms, right. And it was absolute impropriety. Yet, none of this has been addressed. None of it's been rectified. At that moment, Congress had a duty to act. It was recognizable, it was blatant, and it should have been addressed, like Kara's saying. It absolutely, in that moment, that's what impeachment is for. So you have an inquiry, and you bring back in a corrupt or runaway judiciary, which is clear and present danger to the constitutional rights of individuals in these United States.
Right. The laws were literally created just for January 6th, so there's no equal protection. It doesn't apply to any other defendant in the United States. And Beryl House should be impeached and questioned, and that's why she did this, along with a lot of other judges. And hopefully Donald Trump gets in. I'm praying to God wins in the end, and the legislature and the Congress next time around, because obviously it's not going to happen now, will finally impeach these judges and actually, check and balance these people and say, how are you creating laws from the bench? Like, what really happened with these January 6th prosecutions?
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, and I'm thankful. Thank you, Mel, for recognizing this atrocity, for accuracy that it exists in. You have to know that Benny Thompson, I want everybody here on your show to listen really closely. If you don't hear anything else I said, I want you to understand who was wielding the stick of power as it relates to how things came down for the January 6th defendants through the congressional control of the narrative. Benny Thompson, and I challenge this jerk to sue me. I'm ready. Let's go anytime. I'll be happy to enjoy the discovery.
I would say
Benny Thompson was a member of the Republic of New Africa. The Republic of New Africa was a violent extremist gang that was on the terrorism watch list for known guerrilla tactics that believed in overthrowing the United States government and installing a new government called the Republic of New Africa. Not only was he a member, and not only was he a part of it, he was still supporting candidates from the Republic of New Africa, publicly supporting them as late as 2012, before the heat turned up a little, the world got a little smaller under the internet, and it no longer had such a good look. And now he gets appointed to go after what other than the political rivals. He gets to go after conservatives. We're in the way, folks. People like Donald Trump, people like myself, people like Kara and Mel, and other people. If you believe in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, if you believe, you get that little feeling in your heart and your throat when the national anthem's played, and you believe in standing up for that, it makes you feel something, you have a reaction to that, then you're the kind of people they want gone, because you're that nationalist we talked about earlier. You are in the way. You're the kind of people that are going to be on Mel K's show. You're the kind of people that Kara Castronova is going to write about. You're the kind of people that are going to vote for Donald Trump. And you're the kind of people that give a damn about this nation and your children and future generations. And you're in the way of the globalist extremist party operated by the Bidens and Harrises and all these other people, but only to serve as puppets to the grandmasters of the laid out scheme that is coming for you and your America and your children's future.
Well, thank you so much, Mel. That meant a lot. I actually got tears in my eyes. It's true. Meeting people like both of you and other patriots around the country and forming this alliance has been the best thing that has come out of this for me. So I thank you both so much for fighting with me and continuing to fight. And, please, everybody, just go to the Gateway Pundit, read the articles there. We try to tell the truth. We do tell the truth. And follow me on Twitter at Kara Castronova, and continue to watch the fabulous Mel K and follow Treness Evans, two amazing truth tellers that I'm honored to fight with.
Thank you both so much. Keep up the good fight. I am so proud of both of you, and I know this is just the beginning. On the other side, we will be on the front lines to rebuild the best country in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless.